Episode of Paradigm Profiles is on the murder squad. The killing started on January 12, 2017 in Salinas, California. 2 carloads of young Norteño street gang members were driving around in stolen vehicles, hunting on the east side. This was a planned hunt, and for months they were finally putting all their plans and all their pent-up anticipation in motion. But this wasn't no ordinary hunt. This wasn't the typical type of hunting you would normally imagine hunters do when they hunt big game and other game out in the forest. This was a hunt for human beings, and this forest was on the urban streets of Salinas. The type of human beings that were being hunted only had to be composed of one common denominator. They just had to be wearing the color blue. It didn't matter if it was an LA Dodgers baseball cap, a Dallas Cowboys football jersey, or a North Carolina Tar Heels jersey. It didn't matter as long as they were wearing the color blue. The 2 carloads of young gang members who identified themselves as the murder squad was comprised of the shooters and the spotters. As the 2 cars slowly turned down the 500 block of Sunrise Street, they spotted their first group of prey. A small group of Hispanic men were standing outside of a house party drinking and enjoying the cool winter night when the shooters opened fire. A few of the party goers managed to duck and run for cover, but Jose Luis Flores Vargas, 27, and Alejandro Ramirez, 25, were both hit and killed. 2 others were also hit, but they both lived. Within minutes, Salinas PD responded and were led on a high-speed chase by the suspects who were driving a stolen green van. The van eventually crashed in a residential neighborhood, but the suspects managed to get away on foot after the van crashed. During the past year before this shooting, Siaki Gunner Tavale, John Romero Maggot, Anthony Hitter Valdez, Mark Tony from Santa Rita Garcia, Anelu Angel Tavale, Matthew Bandit Ramirez, and Christopher K. Dog Purcell talked about forming the murder squad and had prepared themselves mentally for this. They were young Norteños that formed a subset of the Baranda boys who aspired to be an integral part of the cause. And as they all understood it from their older homeboys, they all had a responsibility as young Norteño gang members to rid the streets of the growing Sureño problem that most, if not all, Northern California cities were experiencing. So they began discussing what they were personally going to do and how they would personally do their part. This case has a lot of similarities and parallels to a case that took place in Santa Clara County back in 2011 that was dubbed El Hoyo Palmas trial. There were multiple Norteño street gang members that were identified in that trial. However, in the end, there were ultimately 4 that were identified as being the main defendants and who were comprised of a hit squad. The trial was held in 2011, but the actual murders occurred between 2006 and 2007. This trial was anticipated to be so big, they actually constructed a new courtroom that would be big enough for all the defendants and their attorneys. Jean Shorte Sanchez, Samuel Castro, Michael Negro España, and Orlando Gangster Rojas were the 4 primary defendants that were convicted in 2011. Like the murder squad, these El Hoyo Palmas gang members drove around hunting for Sureño street gang members to kill. That case involved 15 different shootings, 4 murders, 6 counts of attempted murder, and multiple other charges. Although there was also some level of planning and coordination in their murders, some of their victims weren't even Sureños and were just people who had been wearing the color blue. In the end, they were all convicted and sentenced to life. There were so many charges that it literally took the court clerk over 90 minutes to read through all the charges and allegations. A little over a year since the murder squad killed two of its first victims, it was time to hunt again. Although the group had planned and orchestrated other random shootings, mostly on the east side of Salinas, this was the first time they had vowed to drop more bodies. This time they were driving around in 2 stolen vehicles on another cool winter night. It was a Thursday night on February 11, 2017, when they decided to put their plan in motion. As the spotters took up their position a little further down the street, The shooters, who were driving in a stolen SUV, hung back and slowly scanned both sides of the street, intensely looking for any prey. As they turned down North Hebron Avenue, they spotted a group of Hispanic men outside Hebron Heights Community Center. Two of them were wearing the color blue. This meant it was on. In their minds, this meant that these individuals had to be a group of rival sureños. Gunner, Banger, Hitter, Romeo, Angel, and Tony from Santa Rita leveled their weapons and began firing. Before speeding off into the night, they managed to get off 18 rounds, striking and killing one 39-year-old man in the head. Earlier in the day, the murder squad had doused the SUV with gasoline as a precaution in case it needed to be set on fire. None of them even considered the possibility that the muzzle blast from their high-powered assault weapons could have actually ignited the gasoline, but luck must have been on their side because they managed to get away without incident. The following day, on February 12, 2017, the group was driving around in the same stolen SUV when they encountered two Hispanic men driving in a small light gray Honda Civic. Again, they got their cue when they seen that both men had shaved heads and were wearing Los Angeles Dodgers baseball jerseys. Once they were confident that they had identified two more rival sureños, their adrenaline levels instantly went up and the chase was on. The one common theme about young gang members that are out there headhunting or looking for victims to jump out on like this is, when they approach a potential rival or someone who they think might be a rival and they ask him where he's from, at that point, it really doesn't matter how he responds because they've already made up their minds. It doesn't matter what he says. If they've already made a decision to approach him, they've already made a decision to jump on him. As a youngster, I remember being in these kinds of situations myself. When we were all driving around looking for victims, we're feeding off each other's energy, and the lust for spilling blood is something that continues to accelerate. This is the mindset that is developed, and young gang members understand that their credibility and that their status on the streets is elevated by acts of violence and by the amount of blood that is extracted from their victims. After they find a victim and after they have all jumped out and have committed some heinous act of violence, they then continue feeding off of each other's energy by bragging and boasting about the act of violence that they had just committed. Each one wants his act to be more sinister and more messier than the last guy's. That's just the way that they're taught how to think. Whoever's more violent and whoever has more of a history of putting in work becomes the most feared and the most respected. That's just how the streets work, and this is known as street cred. And aside from the status that they were all trying to establish on the streets, the murder squad had their own status and ranking system within the gang. So they understood that dropping bodies was the fastest way to elevate their stock. These youngsters were no different in that regard. They understood all too well that they would all be respected and would gain a massive amount of recognition for being young soldiers. But what made these youngsters different is that they had no boundaries. They had no limits when it came to putting in work or killing. The average gang member wouldn't take it that far. When the group pulled up beside the light gray Civic, they leveled their weapons and were just about to start firing when the Civic gunned it. When the murder squad turned down Orchard Avenue, the Civic drove halfway down the block and turned into a driveway of one of the residences. The murder squad pulled up behind them and let off two quick bursts of automatic gunfire. A total of 20 rounds ripped into the Civic, shaking it violently as if the small vehicle was being moved from side to side by a good set of spider hydraulics. Both victims suffered gunshot wounds to the neck, torso, and upper back, but they both lived. Now that the murder squad had tasted blood and had already killed multiple victims, it started to become an obsession for them. If too much time began to elapse between the killings, it's almost like they started to go through withdrawals and needed another fix. Whether it was the adrenaline they were craving or the bodies themselves, they had the fever and they couldn't stop. March 25, 2017 would present them with their next opportunity to hunt. But this hunt was a little different from the others. A fellow Norteño street gang member from Salinas had been killed by the Sureños, so tonight was all about get-backs. This was about retaliating for one of the homies who had been shot and killed in this ongoing deadly war. While driving on Dennis Avenue, the murder squad spotted two Hispanic men sitting in the driveway of a residence. One was wearing a blue shirt and the other had a bald head. As they slowly approached the unsuspecting guys, Hitter said, "Nah, those guys ain't Southsiders. They just didn't have that look." And Hitter was usually right. But Banger interjected and said, "Fuck it. Fuck these fools. This is for the homie that died." Because this one was being done to retaliate for the death of a fellow Norteño, they wanted it to be up close and personal. Banger, Hitter, Gunner, and Romeo all jumped out of their vehicle wearing hoodies and ran straight at these two guys while shooting. One of the victims fell and died right where he was standing in the driveway, but the second one had to be chased down and shot in the backyard. When the police arrived, they found two dead bodies that had been shot a total of 32 times. Salinas has always had a heavy presence of gang activity, and gang-related homicides are a common occurrence out there. But as the bodies started racking up and they began to see a common theme with these murders, the FBI stepped in and assigned agents to investigate the cases. Ballistic evidence quickly determined that the shootings were all related. This amplified the entire investigation, and a multi-agency task force was assembled that included a collaboration of the OCSF, Organized Crime Strike Force, the SPD, Salinas Police Department, the HSI, Homeland Security Investigations, the FBI, Federal Bureau of Investigation, the USAO, United States Attorney's Office, the MCDAO, Monterey County District Attorney's Office, and the OCD ETF, Organized Crime Drug Enforcement Task Force. One of the special agents assigned to the case, John F. Bennett, knew in his professional training that these homicides weren't the product of just an ordinary Norteño street gang. He immediately began to look and investigate the correlations between the Nuestra Familia and some of the more bigger influential street gangs in Salinas. What NF members were out of custody, who was functioning in the regiment, and who the up-and-coming Norteño street gang members were was his first lines of investigation. SEM, Southeast Marqueta, Little Casitas, Santa Rita, and a subset of the Baranda Boys seem to all have had connections and were linked to the murder squad. Investigators learned early on that a small gang, which had a subset of the Baranda Boys, had the strongest connection. One of the other ways law enforcement began investigating this case was to pay close attention to the gang graffiti and see if they could identify any conflicts that had developed. Any good gang cop understands that graffiti is how gangs communicate, and sometimes you can decipher things that are going on simply by reading the graffiti. Salinas has always had a lot of graffiti. It's a problem that's plagued Salinas since gangs have been around. But what they noticed is that there seemed to be a lot more Norteño activity on the streets, and that they were crossing out more and more Sureño cliques. This obviously meant that they were beefing. The task force that assembled to investigate this spate of murders didn't have to wait long for the next one. On May 13, 2017, the murder squad went on another hunt for Sureños. This time the group was hunting in the area of Paloma Avenue when they spotted a Hispanic male who they believed to be a Sureño based on the blue baseball cap he was wearing. The shooters fired 15 shots at their suspected rival, hitting him in the head and killing him. On June 11, 2018, they went on another hunt, this time in the area of Center Street. Within minutes, they spotted a man wearing blue shoes and a San Diego Chargers football jersey. 45-year-old Sergio Carcamo was walking in the 100 block of Center Street when he was apparently accosted by members of the murder squad. They rolled right up next to him and asked him where he was from. Before he could even respond, 19 shots were fired from multiple weapons, killing him before he even knew what hit him. The final murder before investigators would close in happened on November 3rd, 2018. This location was close to where they had committed their second murder almost 2 years earlier, right off of North Hebron Avenue in Jefferson. This time, the purpose of the hunt was to commemorate the birthday of a deceased fellow gang member. Killing a Sureño served as sort of an offering to this fellow Norteño who had previously passed away. As they drove down North Hebron Avenue looking for their next victim, they spotted a Hispanic male wearing a blue bomber jacket walking alone. Hitter told Banger, "Look, there goes one right there." The group of shooters pulled up beside Felix Alonso Francisco, and as soon as he looked over to see why his car was stopping, they fired over 35 shots, striking him in the head and body, killing him. At this point, Salinas detectives that were assigned to the case, along with other law enforcement agencies that formed a task force, had seen enough. In October of 2020, they moved in and unsealed a federal indictment charging members who were believed to be part of the murder squad with racketeering, conspiracy, use of a firearm, causing murder, conspiracy to murder in aid of racketeering, and related crimes. One of the suspects, Siaki Gunnar Tavali, is suspected in at least 15 killings between 2015 and 2017, according to recent testimony from a Salinas detective. He's only been formally charged with 2 homicides in the murder squad indictment, but those other homicides are expected to be charged later as the case progresses. The case started to break and the details began to emerge in July 2020 when Salinas detective Byron Ganson took the stand during the trial of a convicted killer, Santos Samuel Fonseca, who was found guilty of killing 2 men with the help of his girlfriend. Although Fonseca, 22, isn't named in the murder squad indictment, Gunner's name came up in his trial as possibly ordering the 2 murders in his case. This was disproven later as evidence proved that he committed these 2 murders on the orders of his gang's leader to demonstrate his loyalty to the Baranda Street Boys. Fonseca's girlfriend, Alexandra Romayor, agreed to lure one of Fonseca's victims, Lorenzo Gomez Acosta, 37, to a park as a ruse to meet him so that Fonseca could kill him. Fonseca's second victim, Ernesto Garcia Cruz, 27, was picked by complete random and was killed as Fonseca simply needed another body to prove his loyalty. But Detective Ganson started investigating Gunner when his name first came up in the Fonseca investigation. In November 2019, Fonseca and another inmate, Jonathan Salazar, 20, who was also facing murder charges in the unrelated case, managed to escape from the Monterey County Jail by digging through a bathroom ceiling in their housing unit, and then they used a plastic brush to traverse an 11-inch hole, got into a chase, and got out through an unsecured hatch. Officials at the jail said that the escape was synonymous to the Shawshank Redemption. Both Fonseca and Salazar turned themselves in less than a week trying to cross back over the border into the United States from Mexico. Law enforcement officials held several briefings after the indictments were unsealed, detailing some of the events in the case. In their words, they said it all started in 2017 when a group of young Norteño gang members, with marching orders from higher-ups in their gang, formed a pack and were hunting humans in East Salinas. Their intended targets were members of the rival Sureño gang, and the hunting and killing were meant to send a message. Stay out of our territory. Stay away from our drug sales. The pack, federal authorities said, against 8 members of the murder squad, hunted indiscriminately and fired that way as well, unloading their entire magazines into their victims. The victims shared commonalities: shaved heads, the color of their skin, maybe the color of a piece of clothing they wore. The competition is fueled by pride and personal animosity, but at its base, it is about money. Authorities know what the problem is, but have done nothing to help these young kids who become products of the lifestyle they have been entrenched in. These young rival gangs fight to control territory and sell drugs to fund their illegal. Gangs have to survive and eat too. Gangs control territory through inciting fear, and they incite fear through violence. Violence dictates membership and status. This investigation is ongoing and more defendants are expected to be identified. Several of the defendants are facing the death penalty if convicted. Siaki Gunnar Tavali was housed in Pelican Bay State Prison when the superseding indictments were unsealed. It seems like more and more of these same types of cases continue to happen all over the country. not just in Northern and Southern California, but all over the country. You've got to ask yourself, why does this continue to happen, and what are we doing wrong as a society to contribute to this? These are young kids who have become products of their neighborhoods. They didn't just wake up one day and know how to go out and form a murder squad. This is something that they're being taught, and this is something that is here to stay as long as society and the politicians continue on with business as usual. We hope you enjoyed another episode of Paradigm Media Profiles. We have a long list of good stories that we're working on that we think you guys are going to like. As we progress and move forward, we're always continuing to strive to become better by improving the quality of. As we progress and move forward, we're always continuing to strive to become better by improving the quality of our work, our videos, and our content. We want you all to know that we appreciate you, the viewers, and all those who have helped us grow.